Hello, welcome to the Alone Show. I'm your host, John Malone. In this episode, no regulars, because reasons as always. As for our guest, she is from Apple Valley in Minnesota. She is retired, previously worked as a pharmacy manager, and now has published a book. What book is that is? We're about to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Peggy Skolberg.
Thank you, Jarme Alane. Yes, my name is Peggy Monroe Scholberg, and I just finished a book called "Girls in a World at War."
Ah,
I could tell you a little bit about it. My mother wrote the book. She had served in the army in World War II in France. She wrote the book about the time I was born, which was almost 70 years ago. And it was never published. And I pulled the book off the shelf when I finally retired, and I finally got it into a form where it's now published and ready for people to read.
wow, very nice. And what inspiration do you have for writing this book?
Well, when I was a little girl, she told me stories about the war, and it became very apparent recently, as my husband and I have always been interested in World War II, that there are very, very few stories about women during World War II. Not many signed up at the time, it just wasn't done, and then very few wrote much about it. So I had this treasure in my closet that I could pull out, and it was really way too long, and I was able to shorten it and edit it and make it a little easier for readers to read. So now people have a story that's based on true facts of World War II.
Fantastic. Oh wow, I heard myself for a second there. So, what was life for you growing up?
Well, both of my parents, again, I mentioned, had served in the war. My father was in England, and he worked with the Fourth Fighter Group, but he was not a pilot. And like so many men, I didn't hear much of anything at all about the war from him. He actually, at some point, had Parkinson's disease, maybe as a result of working with chemical warfare type things in World War II. But he just was kind of a quiet man anyway. My mother, on the other hand, she was pretty good at telling stories when you prompted her. So I heard quite a bit about France and what happened and the other women and some romances over there. And she had a lot of different stories to tell.
Ah, I see. And there it is again. Where do you see yourself 20 years from now?
Well, I am thinking that I might do some more of these. Again, I'm finding that people are interested in these stories. My husband and I just went to France to the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the D-Day at Normandy, and there were just a handful of veterans that were there that are now 100, 102. They're not going to be alive much longer. But I'm still fascinated by these stories, and I still find that people are interested in them. So I see myself writing up more personal stories based on true facts and hoping to get the word out about what actually happened during the war.
Okay, that's nice. Are there any jobs or opportunities you haven't done yet that you would like to do someday?
Well, I think that I have been asked to do some speaking about this and maybe a little education. I am now retired, as you mentioned already. I worked as a pharmacist, and that's a very detail oriented type of, but I kind of like people and I like hearing their stories. I see myself maybe interviewing people and finding out more of their life stories. And I'm also finding that a lot of people don't write them down and they have stories in their family that no one's written down. So I see myself as helping people to collect those stories and maybe get them to print.
Cool, cool. Have you ever met anyone famous?
Well, uh, you know, I've gone to New York City many, many, many times. I love New York City. And I was always surprised that I never met anyone as many times as I've been there, except once. It was late at night. It was on Broadway, and there was sort of a clearing. My goodness, if it wasn't Muhammad Ali right there, he had a crowd around him, and they all stood several feet back from him. He had a presence like I'd never seen anybody have before. There was just something very different about him. I recognized him right away. So I think some of these famous people might have a famous persona that goes with their personality.
Yeah, of course. Would you sleep on the wall or sleep on the ceiling?
Well, I've always thought I can sleep just about anywhere. So I don't know about the ceiling, but I've seen people that, they crouch up on the wall and they put their legs up in there and somehow it's doing something good for their circulation. So I think that's about the best I could do is maybe on the wall. I don't think I'd get a lot of sleep on the ceiling. Thank you.
Okay, that happens. Man, I always keep hearing myself on your end. Yes, but whenever I talk so loudly, I can hear myself. Oh,
Oh, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah,
it's alright,
okay.
but it's gonna happen at some point, I guess.
Okay.
So, have you ever thought about living off the grid?
Living off the grid. Well, that's a good question. I've done a fair amount of camping, and so I've been away from the grid, I guess you could call it. I guess I always knew I would come home. Living off the grid. I think it would be fun to go to some place like Australia and go out for a long summer and spend some time off the grid as long as I thought I could eat well. That'd be my biggest concern, I guess, and be safe. Yeah, I would try it if I thought it was safe. Sure. Good question.
Alright, fair point. Do you know a guy named Joe?
I do. Well, I was talking about my book earlier. There's a character in the book. I told you it's my mother in France, and she met up with a guy on a lake, and they went out. He had both of his hands were bandaged, so he couldn't row a boat, and so she was the one that had to row the boat. But funny that you would mention Joe. His name was, he said Joe, just plain old GI Joe. So he's a character in the book. How's that?
Yeah, I can see that. English or Spanish?
English. I'm learning
Okay.
French though. I'm learning French. And I think the reason I like French is because the food is so good. So I want to be able to order in a French restaurant if I'm there, just be able to rattle it off my tongue and get the right thing. Since I had some training in that before, that's the one that I zeroed in on. And my memory did come back. I was a little surprised. I thought it was going to be impossible, but it wasn't so bad. I'm making a little headway.
Actually starting to like hearing myself from your end. If your mind was an island, what would it look like?
Oh my goodness. Well, boy, you have got the questions, don't you? If my mind was an island, I think it would be one of those with very, very not sharp edges, but would sort of ease into the sand, into the water. I think it would be kind of mushy around the edges and a lot of tentacles out into the ocean and long things that come in. And that's a good question. My mind has a tendency to wander, so I think I'd have to be able to wander from that island all over the place. So under the water where no one could see though probably would be the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Well, I guess if I were to live anywhere, I really do like that French food. I think I would like to live on a somewhere in France. I think that would be a great place to live. A great place to visit, I've always thought would be the Antarctic. Again, but I don't know how easy it is to live there. It sounds pretty cold, but the ice, it's so pretty down there. And I think that would be a really different place to live as long as I knew I could come back and be safe one day. There's kind of a theme here, isn't there? I want to be safe, but I want to venture out. I guess those two are kind of opposing each other, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. What is the most comfortable piece of clothing you own?
Well, that's a good question. I bet everyone says their pajamas, right? Because they wouldn't be your pajamas if they weren't comfortable, and you wouldn't have them as your pajamas if they weren't comfortable. So, yeah, they're real cozy and soft and warm, and I wear the warm ones year round. And I bet it's most people's comfortable clothes. I don't think I'd go out in public in them, but they do the trick for comfort around the house.
Sweet. If you had a song for every time you enter the room, What song would that be?
A song? Let's see. Oh boy. Oh my goodness gracious. What song would it be? Oh man. I'm not thinking of anything. A song. Something about um let's start to dance. Something that would be a dance music. Um get the energy up, get moving, and kind of start a new thing. When you enter a room, I guess it would be. And so yeah, it seems like all places have their sort of atmosphere, and certainly some music could add to the atmosphere. So some sort of dance music, I guess.
Yeah, I said the same. What is the best way to start the morning?
Well, I'm sure you've heard this answer before, is with a cup of coffee.
Yes, I
I
sure
think
have.
not not very original, but the whole world loves it. I noticed yesterday when I was throwing away a little bit of coffee in my cup at 4 in the afternoon, it just didn't look good at all. And it did pass my mind how good that looked first thing in the morning. I gotta say, I think right after sliced bread is the best invention that ever was. I gotta say, though, push a button and you get a cup of coffee with those Keurig machines. That there's nothing better than just pushing that machine, being in your own home, and having a cup of coffee, just like you're at a restaurant. It's great. It's the best. I love it. But I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yes, I have. Many, many times.
Many, many, many times. Push a button, right?
Uh-huh. If you could travel back in time, what decade would you want to live in?
What decade? Well, I have to say I'm really interested in all this World War II stuff. I guess one of the areas that I'm just fascinated about is the French Resistance, where France was occupied by Nazis, and they had a firm rule upon everything, and they were everywhere, and a lot of the resistance went underground and found ways to help win the war. I think it would be really interesting to watch some of that in action, and I'm just always amazed at the risk those people took. And I guess I'd like to go back and see what that was all about.
Would you ever try space tourism? Would you ever try space tourism?
Space tourism?
Space tourism.
Oh, well, space tourism. I don't think so. I don't know. It doesn't do that much for me. I guess I'd rather be on a lake, a river, an ocean. Seems like I don't know. There's some people up there now that they're not sure when they're coming back, right? And no plans for them to come home, no date for them to come home. I wouldn't want to be caught in that situation, I guess. Not for me. No. It'd probably be really, really expensive too.
Yeah, it sure will be.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. If I were wealthy, that might be a different story. I might actually think about something like that, but no, no, too much.
Yeah, especially in this economy, we can't barely afford anything.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. What's your favorite type of day?
My favorite type of day?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love the fall and the colors and the smell, the sound of the leaves, everything about fall I like. I don't know, somehow my body goes into a back to school mode, even though I haven't been back to school in a really long time. It's the time to get the house in order and get new clothes and clean out the closets and start with your new goals. And I don't know, it's just a real uplifting time for me. I love the fall. I'm not too fond of summer. It gets hot and people get slow, and I don't know. A lot of people that's their favorite, but I sure like the fall.
Me too. Yes. What could you give a 40-minute presentation on without any preparation?
40 minutes? Okay. Well, I guess I could talk about this book that I just did. It took me 2 years. When I started it, my background is not in writing, and I've never had a big desire to write a book. And so I took a lot of classes in how to write fiction, that kind of thing. And it really is fascinating. And so I learned a lot, and I went through and listened to podcasts, a lot of different podcasts, listened to books on tape from authors that I like, and I'm just amazed at what authors can do and how fun it is. So I think it would be, I could easily talk to someone that had never written a book and about that process, and also just how fun it was to actually get something to publication. I mean, I'm just astonished. I had no idea it was this much fun. So it would be maybe some inspiration. If I can do it, anyone can do it. That's for sure, because words don't come easy for me. I'm more of a math person, and I'm if you really want to do something, you can do it. So you got to just make up your mind.
Yes, indeed. Would you teleport yourself 500 years into the future or 500 years into the past?
Well, Jarme, I would go in the past. I don't know. The way things are going with the future, I gotta wonder. I gotta, I don't know, too many unknowns. I would love to go in the past because, again, I do like history. I like reading about history. And I've read a number of time travel books now. And I do think it's fun to go back. In 500 years, that would be just about right. Because I don't know, it'd be kind of nice to know what was in the future then if I went back. So I might know. What's that movie, Back to the Future? So I don't know. Not that I would change history at all, but it would be fun to see how things were actually then. That would be fun.
Yes. If you had to pick between skydiving, bungee jumping, or scuba diving, which one would you choose?
Well, that's easy. I think the bungee jumping, probably because it's the safest. The skydiving, I had a good friend of mine that did that, and the first time he went, he crushed his ankle and he had to have surgery, and it was a big disaster. So that's never appealed to me. And I've done the scuba diving, and I do like to swim actually. And but that underwater, once again, I don't know, you could get caught down there. But a bungee, now that looks like fun. You got something that's gonna grab you. I mean, I gotta think that they got that figured out, that it's pretty safe. But it would be fun to fly through the air and know you're gonna get caught. I could really, that would be fun.
Yes, me too. What is the one thing you can't live without?
The one thing I can't live without. Well, I think we already talked about it. I think my coffee. I found, yeah, I can't live without it. It's just too darn much fun. That's it. I like my mornings with coffee, and it's just the way to start a day, I guess.
Lovely jubbly.
Hmm.
What bad habits would you want to get rid of?
Oh, well, I got a big list probably, but I think the the biggest one is I always say I'm a reformed pack rat. I'm not a hoarder at all, but I'm always keeping stuff like receipts, and why do I do that? And so the habit would be just get rid of it. I go to other people's house and they have zero clutter, zero anything, zero unuseful items. And then I just now just cleaned up and threw out a bunch of stuff because I get so tired of myself. So if that was a habit, I don't know where it came from. I don't know, being from a non-wealthy home, I guess. Just um, thinking you got to save things or something. I don't know. I'm sure there's bigger problems than I have, but I I wish I was just a little different in that area, I guess. You maybe have you heard that one before?
I don't think I have.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'd like to be better at that.
What is your favorite holiday tradition?
Oh, my favorite holiday tradition? Well, I think I'm sure you've heard this before too. I think Easter, and there's something about Easter. It comes and it's still cold out, but it's not really cold out, but it's not really warm out yet either. And so it's time for deviled eggs. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but it seems like the whole world loves deviled eggs. And they don't seem to come out until about that time of year. So it's always a hit if I can make deviled eggs and then some sort of lemon tarts or lemon cake or something like that. And so it's real fun. It's a fun change of season to get out of the winter and into the spring. And it's Easter, and you think of bright yellows and new beginnings. And I would say deviled eggs at Easter is a big tradition for me.
Yes. Couldn't agree more.
I bet you haven't heard that one.
I wouldn't know, to be honest. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
If I could afford it, I would. I really like New York City. I don't know what it's like now. I haven't been there in a couple of years now. I'm going to be going up pretty soon here, but there's such an electricity in that city, and there's so many things going on, and they got the Central Park, but yet it's a city, and there's Wall Street and the fashion area. Just the whole energy of New York. I think I'd like to live there for once, for maybe at least a short while. Again, if I could afford it, but I really like being in New York City.
Yes, don't we all? Is there a song you really like, but most people don't know about?
Is there a song?
That you like, but most people don't know about?
What would that be? I'd probably have to sing it, but I don't want to sing it. I like Zippity Doo Dah, Zippity A. That's just a fun song, and maybe I'm just showing my age. How's that? Not a lot of 20-something people would know what I'm talking about. So it's just it's an old fun tune that people don't know, but people my age would know. So I guess it would depend on who I was around if they would knew what I was singing or not. How's that?
Sounds good, yes. I definitely understand that. What is the most ridiculous fact that you know?
Well, I learned something new just the other day. I went to Winnipeg, Canada. Have you ever been there?
I've heard of it, but I've never been there.
Okay. Well, it's straight north of Minnesota. And when I was there, I went to an art gallery, and there was this huge picture of these men that were in World War One. And in the front row of these rows and rows of men, the man in the middle was sitting there with a bear in his hand, a little cub. And the fact of this is the man was a veterinarian, and he had a bear and it had a cub, and he made friends with the little cub. Again, he's a veterinarian. And they named the cub Winnie because he's from Winnipeg. Well, he signed up to go off to war for World War One. He went over to England, and then he was going to go to France. And they said, no bears, no bears. So he had to leave his bear at a zoo in England. So the bear that was there got along with the kids, loved the bear, especially one little boy by the name of Christopher Robin. And Christopher Robin's father was the zookeeper at this London zoo. And his father's name was A.A. Milne. So his father wrote a story about his son, Christopher Robin, and Winnie the Pooh. And that was way back again at the time of World War One. He later sold the story to Walt Disney. And so now you know the rest of the story about Winnie the Pooh.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, that is wild.
The more you know.
Yep.
Who was the last person you've talked to?
The last person I talked to would have been my husband.
Yes?
Yes. And I just talked to him about, I mentioned France earlier, but I don't know if you were aware, but I wasn't, that in 2 days is Bastille Day. That's a big celebration in France. That was when they stormed the Bastille prison, and that was the beginning of the Revolutionary War in France. Well, there's a group here in Minnesota. I think there's a lot of them, but Alliance Française, that's associated with the French government. And they're going to have a big party in the streets on Sunday to celebrate Bastille Day, complete with French food and dancing, accordions, face painting, a bike ride, and I'm trying to think of what else. So we were just talking about whether or not we're going to go to Bastille Day right here in Minnesota.
Interesting. What flavor of ice cream do you wish existed?
Well, let's see. It would have to be triple chocolate brownie bite ice cream. So I guess that would be more brownies and chocolate and fudge than ice cream, but I would be a customer for that kind of ice cream. So triple brownie fudge delight ice cream, if there was such a thing.
Yes, that'd be a delight.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is all we have for this episode. It's great having you on, Peggy, talking about your works as an author, and you were once a pharmacy manager and gone into other things. It's been great.
Well, thank you, Jarme Alani.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And until next time, stay
Okay.
tuned for more.